Hi everyone, my name is Adogs, and thank you all for coming to my channel. So today we're going over the Prism premium deck that took the Bristol Road Springfest. It obviously has been quite a while, so I'm just doing the deck profile now. I was busy doing a couple of things, that's why it took a little bit, but anyway, we'll jump into the video. So we're going to start off with the grade 1s, the grade 2s, grade 3s, and then 0s. So into the grade 1s first, we do run 4 Prism Image Clear. We have her here as, again, she helps us find our verts or our roses, which we want. And then also, essentially, being a 4-1 draw power when it's called from the bind zone, and giving extra power is definitely very handy as well. Next, we do run 3 Prism Promise Princess Slate. This is essentially the counter charge of the deck. We can abuse this quite a few times a turn, using a couple of grade 2s, which we'll get into shortly, as well as a grade 1 run on the deck as well. So we always have, enough amount of Counter Blast and Soul Blast as well, so we do Soul Blast a lot too. And then also just being able to bounce it during the opponent's turn to give our Vanguard higher base power, or give something, 4k power as well. That's very nice too. It helps make magic numbers. That's why we run the free Princess Slate. Next, we run 3 Murmidal with Sedna, essentially the grade 3 searcher. We're trying to search for our Hill Guards and our verts, because I said we want to make sure we run Vert, as it is the only grade 3 run on the deck, aside from the Hill Guards. Next, we run 3 Killing Heart Yuika. So, the reason we have Yuika here is because when we get into one of the grade 3s shortly, one of the grade 2s essentially allows us to call cards top of the deck, and one of our grade 2s that we run does not allow us to bounce normal units, trigger units, sorry. Yuika does allow us to bounce trigger units, which is very handy. Which is also very nice in early game, where we can kind of call stuff in front of Yuikas, bash face and then bounce the cards back, so then we can't get damage denied, so they're forced to attack for our Vanguard. Also, when the opponent's on grade 3, it does get 5k when a card's placed in front of it. It's only once per turn, but essentially helps make magic numbers. So that's why we run the 3 Yuikas. Then lastly, we run the 3 Duoprity Norm Ural. So the reason why I run her is because most of the time we usually only have 1 counter blast, because majority of the time with Prisms, if people know how to play against it, they will try and damage deny it, because we essentially need a counter blast for our Rosa, and we also need a counter blast for our Vert. Now, the reason why we want to counter blast for Rosa is because we're trying to increase our bind zone, so we can actually use Vert in the scenarios where we might not find a clear or anything like that. They can search for our Rosas and stuff. So what essentially Ural does is, when she's placed, we can find a card from our deck and bind it, which means you don't have to worry about using Rosa in grade 2, because we have a card bound ready. So when we get to Vert, we can use a counter blast for her instead. And then with her second skill, we pretty much, her skill essentially allows us to put stuff in the bottom of the deck, but then with a card we put in the bottom of the deck was a card that was in our bind zone as well. So for example, just say we have a Rose in the bind zone, and we put a Rosa from our drop back to the deck. Because the Rosa was in the bind zone, we do get to draw one. This essentially allows us to draw multiple cards a turn, sometimes up to 4 or 5, depending on how stacked our drop zone is, depending on how many soul we have as well, and depending on how our bind zone is looking. So she can definitely be a massive plus as well. So overall, she's just a very, very solid card. So for the grade 2s, we first of all have 4 Rosa. So again, Rosa essentially allows us to plus as well for a counter blast. We can look at top 7, add any Prism, add 2 cards. Select 2 cards. So we put one in the bind zone and put one in hand. So she essentially allows us to set up our bind zone and our hand. We can use it to find verts. We can use it to find our counter charger. We can use it to find the clears. If you want the clears, there's extra shield value. She's just definitely very solid overall. Very nice card. And then also with a second skill, being able to pump the prisms in the front row by 10k is also very strong as well. We have 2 set up. it's essentially giving 20k to front row, which makes them very massive numbers. So she's definitely a very, very strong card. Next, for grade 2s, we have 4 Lisalot. I can't remember when we're at the 4th one. I've been doing a little more testing, so the text changed a little bit. But yeah, so with Lisalot, essentially what we're doing is, we use a skill to, call something from the top of the deck. We can use it on grade 1. So if we open a Yoika, or if we write a certain grade 2, which will go into next, we can abuse Lisalot quite a few times, make a ball for free, so not actually committing too much cards from hand. So which is definitely a very, very solid card. And especially has a really nice interactions on our whole Trotter turns as well, so probably run for this a lot. I might go into a couple of combos into the deck as well, just to kind of solidify the reasonings behind some of the cards. And then lastly, yes, we do have the 3 top idle Aqua. Essentially, which plays something on a rigor circle, we can choose up to 1 card, normal unit on our field, bounce back to hand, and then draw 1, then dish 1. So again, if we play some Vanguard Circle, we use Least Lot on grade 1, we can use the Aqua to bounce at Least Lot, and then call the Least Lot out, on the grade 2 to generate another card on board. She can also be used to bounce her Urals back. So we can use Ural a couple times. You need to draw a couple of cards if we have the right setup in the drop, or just even putting cards in drop as well, so we don't deck out. Also does help with the counter charger as well. Essentially on place bounce our late back, so we have a counter charge and soul charge, a free strong too. So she has some very nice interactions. She also has a nice interaction on the whole Trotter turn as well, and I'll go into that combo when we get into there as well. Now for the grade 3s. Again, we just run the full vert. She's pretty much, the main Vanguard of the deck, or the only Vanguard of the deck. Yeah, she's just very solid around. So essentially, she has 2 skills. So again, if we go on first, her first skill is pretty much so we can Soul Blast one and bind a card of Prism from its card name from our drop into the bind zone, and it gets an extra drive. That's very nice. If we go on first. We have a Vanguard triple drive. Essentially, it's like a striding of sorts. But also being able to set up cards from our drop to the bind is very nice as well. So we can maybe, if we have to get a Rosa into the bind zone, we have just say, for example, we have the Rosa in the soul, we can Soul Blast the Rosa, put the Rosa into the bind zone. Same with Clear, it clears on the soul as well. We can also do that too. Which is definitely a very nice setup card. And then her second skill, when she attacks, you can kind of surround and return all of your front row units back to hand, and then call up to 1 card with its card name from a hand to Regal Circle, from our bind to Regal Circle, sorry. But then if opponent's on grade 3, we can call 2 instead. So again, this is how it enables us to call the Roses and Clears and stuff out of the bind zone to get those extra effects. Which is definitely very strong. Both Clear and Rosa are very powerful. You either go for Clear, if you want to draw extra cards, because again, if you have 2 Clear set up and you have adequate amount of Prisms on the drop, you can essentially just use Vert skill. You bounce front row, call 2 Clears, draw 2 essentially, and they get power of themselves, which is really strong. Or again, we can go for 2 Roses to give the front row 20k. We could potentially use their skills as well if you have the adequate amount of counter blast as well. But mainly, if we're calling 2 Roses, we're pretty much trying to push and finish that turn. The main play I usually do is I'll call a Rosa and a Clear, 1 of each, so I get some extra draw power, still set up my bind zone, so if I have a Rosa, put the Rosa into the bind zone, and then use Rosa to give the front row 10k. So that way I always have resources for Vert to use every single turn, especially since we won't always have all the counter blasts that continues to use Rosa, so we need to find other ways that allows us to put cards in the bind zone without having to use a massive amount of counter blast, especially if it have a draw any lates. So again, that's why I run the 4 Vert. We do run the 1 Nectaria. So the Nectaria definitely a big consistency boost when we run 1, because we don't really want to draw multiple. Essentially, when we get this, we can bind anything from our deck, so we can find our roses or our clears. For some reason, if we find the late, we can put late in there as well because Vert can call it out. We could even set it up in an early game. If we go on first and call the late out. That's if we really need to do it. That's usually pretty bad if we need to do that. But yeah, she's just a very, very solid card overall. You can also, because she binds herself, you can call her out from Vert. You can summon out G-Guards to bounce it back, so we can continuously keep using that terror as well. So it's also another reason why I only need to reuse one. Just definitely has some nice interactions with our G-Guards as well, being able to give our Vanguard extra power too. So yeah, next area free, very solid one off. And then the other one, Terror Attitude, because we can run it, and it's just a free PG against strides. So for the zeros, we of course from the starter, you run a crit. We run the free and soul ones because we do use a lot of soul, especially if we're using Ural a lot every turn, or we're using Yorkers and stuff as well. It definitely does show up a lot of soul, so this does actually come up quite a few times. And also in some scenarios where you might have to call a couple of cards, you might be a card short, you might have to say you have 2 cards in hand for a Trotter because of Ural, because you have the Idol, sorry. You can put the Idol in the Soul, give the Mega plus 10k, draw one, so now you have enough cards in hand to discard for your Hot Trotter. Then we also do run the 4 Trudy because since Verts are only grade 3 in the deck, we want to find other ways to stride that does not require us to discard our Verts. So try run those 4 stride crits. We run 3 draw PGs, 4 Hill Guards, 1 OT, and the Crook. Crook just self-explanatory. Allows us, it's a way of combo extending, doing extra attacks and stuff. So definitely very solid card. And that is the main deck. So we'll go into the G zone. So there are a couple of cards in the G zone since again changed a couple of things around, but the cards I don't have are just pretty much put face down. Alright, so we do have the 2 Hot Trotter. So this is pretty much the stride we're pretty much always going into every turn. Essentially just generating 8 attacks. It's very, 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 very strong. As we know, we get 1, 2, 3 when she swings, calls 2 out. So 3, 4. Sorry, my apologies. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll be on our Vert at that stage. So we'd swing with the Vert. The Vert would bounce to front row. And call 2 cards from bind to get the 8 attacks. It's definitely very nice. The fact that she bounces cards back is very nice, so we can trigger the skills of our lates. Definitely very, very important. Also being able to bounce back like our Urals and stuff too, to abuse Laurels a couple of times as well, being able to draw extra cards is definitely very nice. You could also abuse our Roses, because again we can call a Rosa, we cannibalize the skill, and then if the Trotter can bounce it back, call the Rosa back too, and then you use Rosa as well. Again, that's a lot of counterblast, so you have to be careful with that. But yeah, definitely have some nice interactions, and I'll explain some of the other interactions in the combo section. Next, we do run 2 Tarua. I think I'm probably going to bump it down to 1 after a lot of testing and stuff, but still at 2 for now. At the time I was running 2, essentially we use her and we don't really have much left in the bind zone because we couldn't generate more cards in the bind zone at the time. Also very good as well when we're very close to deck out because you can put cards back like triggers and stuff, so helps us from not decking out, because that's definitely a problem, especially with this deck. The deck can draw quite a bit, and I'll just show a way how to draw quite a few cards in one turn. So that's why we run the 2 Tarua. It also becomes a pretty big beats deck, which is nice too. We run the 1 Ange. So Ange is pretty much just for the Link Joker matchup. I didn't expect to be finding any Link Jokers, but just in case there are, we do have the Ange. Now, of course, the Health Shorter can also bounce your lock cards back, but again, that's free counterblast. And sorry, that's free discard from hand. So sometimes it's not really worth it. So that's why we do run the end. She does get big too, so that's also nice as well. And she also get that extra drive too. So it's at least a quad drive. That's nice. We do run the one Alprina. Essentially, when you damage denied, this is what Alprina is for. Most of the time, you should be fine, especially going first. You should be getting a lot of damage anyway. But if you go in second and, for some reason the opponent has decided not to give you any damage whatsoever, especially if you're versing like maybe an Axel deck, a deck that hits lower numbers than our deck, that can potentially be a problem. But I've never really had that encounter, so I'll put it just in there, just for that scenario though, if that does ever do somehow encounter that. Sorry, apparently my English is absolutely shocking today. Next, we do have the one Megiddo. Megiddo is just very, very, very strong, especially when you don't really have much left. We have 2 Counterblast. Because we can draw quite a bit, we can usually find our verts, but also their rows can help find verts as well and everything. So again, when we're on turns where we don't really have much left, Megiddo can sometimes be the final push. If we're going for this kind of play as well, what we can kind of do in advance is try and set 2 force markers up. So when we do go into the Megiddo, we can just keep exchanging our regards to get the maximum value from our attacks. So that's why we run the Megiddo. There's supposed to be a Ballerina in here. Because in this deck itself we run a lot of grade 1s and 0s, when we have more hand than the opponent, and they're like on 5 damage. Usually we can use Ballerina as like a confirmed finish. So that's why we do run the one Ballerina. We do run the one Shandy. Shandy, I don't typically go into this stride, but the reason why I have her here is because when we literally have nothing, we have not found anything, Shandy can kind of help us find something. So like finding cards like our roses, our lates, finding like the aquas as well to kind of bounce things back as well. That's pretty much why we have her in here. We need to make sure that we're generating sources, making big cans. Our Urals as well, sorry, because Urals is kind of like a way we draw all the cards too. So, but most of the time we very rarely ever come in that scenario. But if it does happen, we do have the Shandy there. So next we do run 2 Shining Garnet. So the reason why we run Shining Garnet is because she's essentially like a very strong finisher, or a way to kind of like push a lot of cards out of the opponent's hand. So the reason how that works is essentially she has an Limit Break 5 ability, which continues to the Vanguard Circle, that all units of Prism in the card names get +1 crit. So essentially that means that our Vanguard and then our Reguards will have the crit. We use a skill as well, which is you can last one to choose one of your Vanguard skills and give it that skill. So we can give this multi-attack skill avert, so we get 5 attacks that all have that extra crit on it. So it's definitely a very strong turn, especially if opponents on 4. And they might have a decent amount of hand or something like that. Or you think, you've seen their previous strike checks and stuff. It's maybe not the greatest, and maybe Health Shorter isn't the best play because maybe you don't, exactly have, an adequate amount of cards to discard, or just the value isn't that great. With the Shining Garnet, we do have the Shining Garnet here to kind of like push and kind of close out games. I think there was one game I actually go into Garnet, and I'm pretty sure I just closed the game of that because again, since I had a couple roses set up in the bind zone, and I had front row prisms already, Some of those they had crit, so they couldn't take it because they're on 4. Then I had the Garnet swinging, had the skill of Vert's second ability, pulling the roses out, giving them the front row plus 20k. It was absolutely disgusting. So that's why I do run the 2 Garnets for those scenarios. So for G guards, we do run the 1 hand-in-hand Leona. So again, we can use Leona to bounce our Lates back to give it extra shield. To give everything an extra power, sorry, extra 4k power to become 17. But we also use her to kind of like bounce cards like our Sedners, our Clears, anything we could also probably use as like kind of like a bit of an extra shield. That definitely comes handy because essentially, if you guard with the same card you bounced, it essentially becomes a 30k shield. So it's definitely very, very nice. That's why we run the 1 hand-to-hand Leona. This main reaction, the main interaction with Late's the main reason why I run the Leona. We do run 2 Citron, so we use this to use this for like a Lisa lots, kind of generate extra board. Because in some scenarios we do that. We also use her for our Aquas, during the opponent's turn, being able to core stuff, bouncing cards back as well. So for example, we can use her to call Aqua to bounce the Late, and Late will still give the Vanguard power as well. We can use her for the Roses to call the Roses out during the opponent's turn, to maybe like, for example, try and find a Vert, especially if we're maybe going to an Ultimate Strike, something like that. And so we already have an Ultimate Strike footer already on hand, but we just need that extra one so we can generate the extra marker. That's there as well. We can also use her to call out the Urals to generate an extra draw, provided that we have the card in the bind zone. Correlating to a card on the drop, so we can put the bottom to draw. Or again, just be able to put cards back. Definitely very solid too. So that's why we run the Citron. It's also a really big shield too, so also very nice as well. Oh, sorry, and another interaction I almost forgot to say. With Narukami, essentially what you can do, you can call Citron down, especially when they have your front bow cleared. You can call a card to the front rows, they can stop the shows and stuff from doing multi-attacks, so I run the Citron for that as well. We do run the 1 Sandy. Sandy essentially can, in some scenarios, be a very big shield. You flip something, doesn't require any counter blast or anything like that, or soul blast, so something up, which is nice. You can counter blast on even an extra 5k, but don't really use it for that. But yeah, this is just definitely very solid, especially with a big hand. This can become like a very almost like a perfect guard of sorts, depending how big a hand is. We can just kind of like just stop a big attack. So the Sandy is definitely very handy. I don't know about that right, but anyway. And then lastly, we have the 1 Lucrece. So the interaction I was talking about with the Nectaria, essentially what we can do is when we use Lucrece, we can bounce Nectaria back, so then we can use Nectaria for next turn. And then if we do, for example, bounce Nectaria back, we give our Vanguard plus 5k. So that's definitely very nice. So our Vanguard is being 18, sorry, instead of being 17. So it actually hits over the force Excel marker threshold. Because usually when you use Late, it only becomes 17. So again, the 17s, sometimes which you can find in the actual decks, can still poke over the 17. So you can also use it, to bounce our Roses if we had a Rosa on board for some reason. Then also you can use it to bounce other cards. Great Tools of Less back as well. Is for a counter blast, like to give extra shield too, which is perfectly fine. Essentially, if we're bouncing back like a grade 1, essentially it would be a 40k shield, since we have 30 and then plus the 10k on top from the grade 1s we usually have. It's definitely very solid. So that's why we run the 1 Lucrece. And that's pretty much the deck profile. So we'll go into the combos now. The first combo is with Ural. So what we do essentially is, this is our bind zone, this is our drop. So we can call the Ural out to put a card on the bottom of the deck, because a card on the bottom of the deck had a name as one of the cards in the bind zone. That's all plus 1. And draw 1. We can call out the Aqua. The Aqua will bounce the Ural back. We ditch 1. We call the Ural back again. We can use the Ural skill to put another card back. So we'll choose the grade 2. Again, because we have it in the bind zone, so plus 1. Draw another one. If you had like another Ural in hand, you had more soul, you can again do it again. Just say this is what we have. Actually, just put it here, just an example. Swing, swing a full draw. Use skill, we'll ditch 3. Bounce these back. Call that a Ural and something else. Say we'll call the Rosa. We can use Ural again. So put the card back. Because the card we hook back, had a card of the same card name as the bind zone. So plus 1, draw another one. Essentially what this does as well is that essentially made the whole cost of our Trotter free. Because we drew 2 from Ural already. And then when we swung with Trotter, we discarded 3, called Ural, and then we still blasted 1 to draw 1. So we drew 3 in total. So essentially we helped mitigate the cost of our Trotter. So that is the Ural play. I said the more Urals you have, potentially the more you can draw. So for example, if you have 2 Urals and you have about a couple of quite a few cards in Soul, there's the potential of drawing 5 cards that turn. So Ural is definitely very silly, especially since she isn't once per turn. Combo. This will show you how to get both your Counterblast and your Soul back. Just say, for example, you have no Soul and no Counterblast whatsoever. So what you can do is you can just say, for example, pull these cards here. You just don't use her skill. We'll just say she's on board previously. So we can swing with our late, swing with this regard. We will then swing with our Trotter. We'll ditch 3 to bounce these cards back. We'll then call the Aqua and the late back. So late triggers already because she'll just bounce back. So you counter charge 1, just say soul charge 1. We'll give the Aqua plus 4. We use Aqua skill to bounce the late back. And then late skill will activate again. So we counter charge 1. And soul charge 1. And now we have the Counterblast for our Trotter. We also now have Counterblast for our Vert. So we can pretty much play our whole turn up now. Obviously, do have 1 less attack. That's perfectly fine for being able to do just 7 attacks. The last combo, well, I wouldn't say really combos, but it's just how to really utilize Lisalot to fullest potential. So in this scenario, just say you have a grade 2 and a Lisalot in hand. Instead of calling the Lisalot, save her. Just call this grade 2 instead. So I'll explain why. So we will, swing. This is 33. Then swing this column. This column is also 33. We'll just say use the Uika to bounce the Rosa back. Let's just say we have like 3 cards in hand, but we also don't want to get rid of this a lot, so we bounce this back. The Tingle Full Trotter. Use this skill to ditch 3. Bounce back. Call the Lisalot, and then call one of the grade 1s in the back row. Then we'd use Lisalot to call something in the front row. That way, in this scenario, regardless if we either called either the Uika or even this, we'd still have a 20k column, but we can delegate power here because this would be getting a bit bigger. And again, if we find a grade 2 or anything, like in general, this column will be 33. So it's a way to maximize Lisalot and have 8 strong attacks for the whole turn. And that's everything. So if you guys enjoy, please share it with me. Make sure to leave a like while you're down there. Why not subscribe and hit the notification bell so that when I upload another video, you will be notified. Dogs out. See ya.